On you when it's going. But I will kick us off by. All right. And everyone can see my slides there. Okay. Yep.
Yep.
All right. Hello, I'm Thomas Hall, Executive Director of Clean Start, and we've got a Clean Start Perspectives for you today. That's going to be really interesting, mostly because we're going to talk about what it takes to kind of build a company that with hard tech. Or you might think kind of dirty tech in this case, but that's just because it's made with dirt. Um, but first off, I want to recognize who we're supported by. We're supported by SMUD, our local utility, who's looking for innovations to reach their 2030 zero emissions goal. Chico Start, which is the Cal OSPA iHub up here in the Northern California. Fresno State, the Wet Center, who's our partner with us and the CEC on creating an innovation cluster for clean tech. Witten Law, who supports early stage companies of all types. And if you want to connect with them and just talk with them, they're a great resource. Moss Adams, a regional or a local CPA and accounting firm that helps. Actually, they do a lot of work with on energy projects. So if you have an energy project and you're looking for an accounting firm, check out Moss Adams. And if you have an energy project and you're looking for a bank, check out River City Bank because they do lots of energy transition financing. And with that, I would like to welcome Miguel, our guest. Miguel actually went through our CEO crash course in 2023 and has had success and struggles since then, as all business owners do. But Valley Adobe was founded in his company was founded in 2023. It produces compressed stabilized earth blocks, or CSEBs, and pavers. He has the only such facility in California, and it provides the next generation of Adobe with higher compression strength and water resistance, meeting the needs of current building code. His team supplies both earth and construction materials and service, delivering an attractive, high performance, low carbon masonry alternative in the Central Valley. So, with that, I would like to welcome Miguel, founder of Valley Adobe, to just kick us off with some little bit of background of his experience. And I think he has some slides to share. Miguel?
Yep. Thank you, Thomas. Let me share my screen. You guys see that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, what is Adobe? Some people get confused because Adobe's a software as well. And so we're talking about the old-fashioned brick here. Um, Comes from the Arabic atub, which just means brick. And not to be glib, but in doing this work, I've had to learn a lot about soil science and geology, all this kind of stuff. And it is kind of amazing to realize that our Earth is actually stardust. A lot of the heavier elements are made from supernovas. And so it does make it a little easier when you're just, surrounded by dirt all day to realize, it too is something profound and possibly quite useful. And so Adobe that I'm working with is earth building material. It's been used from earliest times as a way to make shelter and almost made it to the modern day in the US, but seems to have been left behind for reasons we can get into. Um, Adobe is not a solution, I don't think, for all the climates where building's going on. My take on it is it's essentially good for deserts with one S, not to eat. And that's because there's a big night and day temperature change, and so the thermal mass and latent heat of the block help really create a comfortable indoor environment. And the thing to think about with Adobe that gives it these special properties is just the clay in there. Clay is the smallest particle of soil. It's very flat, kind of platelet structure, and it has a electromagnetic charge, and so they tend to stack on top of each other, and they can slide, but sometimes they're very difficult to separate. And this just gives it binds the block together, and it also allows the block to breathe, absorbing and evaporating water vapor and controlling humidity and temperature. A little bit about, how we got launched, how we got started, a lot of random acts of kindness. And so the first one, I'm sure a lot of people are kind of had something similar where, you're just sitting there and one person you meet kind of puts you on a new trajectory. So in this case, I happen to be having a board meeting dinner next to a sixth generation manufacturer, a guy named Mike Betts of the Betts Company. And he really was excited to show me all of the resources to support manufacturing in the Central Valley. And so he introduced me to one of the sponsors here, the Wet Center, learned about what they did. They connected me with you all, Thomas and Gary at Clean Start and the CEO Crash Course. And then at the local coffee shop, ran into Hector, a guy who runs a local CDC, and he introduced me to this group, Center for Community Transformation, that does social enterprise work and new business incubation. And they were an early funder, won their Spark Tank competition in 2024, I believe. And they helped build our first building at our job site. And Chamber of Commerce came through. And so these are some of the first fundings. They tend to be small, and the business is largely self-funded up to this point. A couple things I've learned. One is just I've read the materials from the machine provider and kind of people on the internet, and something I didn't appreciate till I came on the business end is sometimes people tell you what you want to hear and not always exactly what the actual case is. And so I think I thought I would make a lot more blocks based on the manufacturer's specs, but that hasn't been the case. As far as my workers, it can be very tough work. And so in some ways I'm lenient, but in other ways, I have a high standard and can be kind of firm. And so trying to find that right balance of how to communicate just expectations with the workers so that we can have a bit more of a good flow. I've sort of learned that the business functions best when I'm all hands on deck. And even if I try to create some pattern or process for the employees to follow, that it's really about being innovative and solving things, being on the factory floor. And this last one is more of a question maybe we could talk about with you, Thomas and Gary. But I know that there tends to be an all-in preference for startups, and the idea that you put everything behind it and you just run as fast and as far as you can go. I've sort of felt like, because it's a new industry and it's taken some time, and also just me as an individual, sort of what I can take on and for how long, I've sort of taken more of a long distance run approach and kind of pacing myself and still keeping other income from other employments. And it's created some real tensions as I've tried to balance all of those, but also has somehow given some breathing room so that there's not as much pressure early on to the venture. A little bit about where we are now. And so you mentioned, Thomas, that we're making the CSEBs, which are the new, stronger block. Quite a bit of business this year has been just from restoring some older Adobe walls, which use a more traditional Adobe block, using asphalt emulsion as a way to stabilize, to keep it waterproof. And so we're learning that technique. and providing that service. We also had one of the missions had a tree branch fall on them and asked us for blocks to fix the wall. So kind of recognizing that as a business niche. Going forward, the fires in LA have created a lot of buzz around fireproof buildings and at city and counties about building for resilience and working with a client to get a set of ADU or accessory dwelling unit plans through the county and then through the city of Fresno, add them to their pre-approved plans. And the hope there is once people have a set of approved plans, it'll be much easier for them to order blocks and build with. Still kind of got some kind of niche markets that I'm hoping to explore, but I haven't gone all the way in yet. One of them's agriculture. Being here in the Central Valley, that's a huge market. And so was just talking to somebody last week who grows dragon fruit, which is like this small vine, a bit more kind of tropical, doesn't like the frost, and needs kind of a structure to grow on. And so might that be a good fit? Working with the mayor of the city of Huron, a small farm working community, about building some houses for the farm workers there, and also doing some work around homelessness, building a pilot structure at a local nonprofit, Dakota Eco Garden. Yeah, and if I had time, I would go out and solicit more with nurseries and material yards. And pretty much this year, last year was a lot of investing in the business, investing in training staff, and this year kind of focused on not spending more than we make and only making things people want. And that is the slideshow.
All right. I think this is a good way to catch up on all the stuff that I guess you can work on. One of the things that um, I wanted to, I guess, start with by talking about is you mentioned quality control in there. Um, and I know there's always a lot of, a lot of startups are really excited to get their minimally viable product. And usually it's something that's somewhat broken and that you would never want to deliver, to millions of people potentially. But
Right.
you have, you can't really ship a minimally viable brick to build someone's home, or to
Mm-hmm.
build someone's, ADU on that. So could you talk a little bit about how, your, approach to quality control or innovations around that has, either supported your business or been, a stumbling block?
That's a good question. You know, uh, yeah, originally it was a big problem, but it made it easier because we were creating bricks for us to use at our own site. And so it was its own feedback loop. We didn't have to worry about making shoddy bricks for clients. We would be able to see what, if any, issues there were with the bricks. And so originally it was kind of a height problem because they're self-stacking. And so that makes the construction quick, but they all have to be exactly the same height. So dialing that in for the machine made bricks was important. I do feel like I had a minimally viable product because I started with a hand press that I had bought 5 years before out in India. And so I was making blocks. It was very laborious. I was hand sifting the clay, hand shoveling the mixes. And so there's no way I could sell that at a profit, but it was minimally viable in that the blocks that came out were good. I could build things with them. I could kind of see if there was demand. And so I sort of see that as the minimally viable product stage. I have just recently in the past 2 months, as I'm moving towards the city building permits or county building permits, um, tested the blocks for compression, modulus of rupture, linear shrinkage, absorption. And so that's been a good relationship to make with the testing lab there. Um, and the blocks are coming out good and more than enough. And the next one I'm working on is this old style Adobe, and I thought it would be easy, Thomas. And so I was one of those guys. Yeah, sure, we'll get it to you. Yeah, yeah, about 3 4 weeks. Yeah, 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 locked and loaded. And then it rained a bunch here over the winter, and I started making the blocks, and they came out kind of like cracking and disformed and disfigured. It looked like your third grade uh, pottery project, the kids pottery project thing. You're like, what is that supposed to look like? And so realizing on that one that we'll probably take a hit as far as the amount of time and materials that we're making. But I sort of see that as, again, sort of investing in learning a new process, creating a new product. And it's a little bit like providing a discount to some early customers to get them in the door and to kind of create your word of mouth and your client history. And so kind of okay if we end up losing a little bit. But definitely trying to get something viable and something quick. And so I've been working on that. But yeah, that's kind of where we are with the
One thing I kind of
products.
picked up
Yeah.
on there that I heard, and also from when you were talking about it, is, one thing that we were always impressed with, on your kind of gumption and working on this at Clean Start is the fact that you networked with a whole bunch of groups and talked to a lot of people. Like you mentioned there, the person who kind of gets you started with the Wet Center, then on to Clean Start, and then I know you went on to win a grant, and then you also worked with business development groups to make sure that your location was secure from theft. And in the past couple months, you mentioned that you've been, it sounds like, doing a lot more of the science of how to make um, a quality brick and getting, I guess, certifications around it. How did you kind of, what resources did you use to be able to get or learn or connect with people to help you make, I guess, the better quality, the certified brick?
Hmm. That one was just, there's only a few materials testing companies here in the Valley. Happened to know one through kind of a brother's ex-girlfriend type situation. She used to work at BSK Laboratories. They're right by where my yard is, so I'm driving by all the time. Although they moved their main office maybe about a year or two ago, and so I just always had them in mind, and they weren't answering. I had an intern try to work on that for me, and they couldn't get through by phone or email for weeks and weeks, and so I just ended up driving down there a couple months back, and that was the whole deal. And that might be like a little microcosm because the front desk lady's name was Cottoman, which is my sister's name. So then I'll return the next time with another brick to test. She remembered me. The two guys who work there by email, it's like kind of being extra friendly. People kind of like hearing about the brick. People kind of like Adobe. Oh, hey, that's cool. We normally don't do those types of tests, but it's like, trying to be somebody that people want to work with and don't mind, going out of their way for is, I think, helpful. And so I'm somebody who likes to try to like be friends with whoever is nearby, and it just turns out that's good for business. Like I think I'd be doing that anyway, but it doesn't hurt to have people to work with, ongoing over time. Yeah, and as far as making the brick stronger, it's a bit expensive to do the test, so we haven't, run multiple iterations to say, oh, with this slightly different mixture, how do we rate? It kind of doesn't matter. There's a very low minimum threshold for building permits. Once you get there, it's just kind of about, the engineering that you show that your wall stands up. And so I think for me, it would be useful to optimize the brick, not to put in more cement than I needed, to make it strongest as possible with natural materials. But, maybe a Cal Earth test bed or Cal test bed or something that, pays for some of that, or a partnership with the university. Um, I've reached out to Fresno State and UC Merced to see if some of their professors would be interested. I know UC Davis has Michele Barbato that does a lot around Adobe. So just kind of waiting for some free testing before really going whole hog on
You're gonna drive and talk to them too.
that. Yeah, exactly. Road trip.
Yeah. Gary, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay, I'm off. All right, it's really fascinating what you've been talking about, and one of the big reasons we wanted to get you on a perspectives is to illustrate several things that you've done in building a business. One of them that we sort of harped on, both in the crash course and other things we've done, is the value of growing slowly at the beginning. Because if you do go out and talk to a lot of investment groups, the common question is, well, if we gave you twice as much money, could you move twice as fast? And that's got a big pitfall with it, that if the product really isn't ready, you could get yourself in big trouble. And you're sort of
Mm-hmm.
the example of why you do want to go slowly until you're very confident of the product and very confident of what a consumer is looking for. So you've coupled that with getting enough revenue to stay afloat. But I know that you've had several stabs at it. And did you learn anything in the various ways you've tried to go about it, that if you had to do it differently in the way you've grown and the way you've tested, that you recommend to people that do it? But more or less, tell us more about the value of, you know, do a small job, test it, make sure that people are happy, and then improve from there.
Yeah. Um, I think that's very critical. I think too, my mission and vision for the goal is to be for the company is to be a high quality, block producer, but also in the construction we do, kind of want there to be kind of a feel and upliftment of all that. And learned a lot. I think early on, getting the hand press and doing it that way was smart, because it was very inexpensive and gave me a lot of time to work with the soil, which uh, is its own area of expertise, and that allowed me to do it in my own time, and it allowed me to see how the product weathered and and how it held up over time, which was important. I didn't want to sell something and claim that it would last forever, and then a few years later, there's all kinds of cracks in it. So I think that gave me confidence. We built a bunch of saunas, but we weren't expert roofers, and we've tried like different roof structures, but one or two of them leaked. And we're very happy that we didn't just run off and do 20 saunas having the wrong roof design. And so we've gone back and kind of fixed and patched those, learned something, and are ready to kind of level up. Um, and yeah, with these current blocks, you think I would have learned the lesson, even though I seem to be representative of take it slow, but I was ready to build 500 of these, manufacture 500 of the new Adobe blocks that were poured in the form. And I called the workers in, and we started going, and then realized, hey, this isn't even the right kind of mix design. And so being able to have the workers kind of flexibly on call, so weren't wasting a lot of time and money with them, and just me having the time to work on getting the right soil mix. So yeah, that's a bit what I was talking about, Gary, like the tension. Sometimes I feel I don't have enough time to dedicate to the bricks is what I'd like, and so that can be frustrating. But at other times it's very useful to have something that brings in revenue, so that there's not as much pressure, and the business has like a longer runway and a bit more
Mm-hmm.
breathing room. Um, but I guess it depends on people's product and maybe their ambition. Um, for me, it's kind of an art form to realize how the soil works and the production and the change in variables. And so I want to perfect the craft as much as I can, and creating and selling blocks is going to help me along that way. But I think that's going to be an ongoing endeavor.
So, I mean, the big competitor you have in landscape materials, cheap landscape materials, is like basalite blocks, which is a concrete product.
Mm.
And they've got manufacturing plants all over the place. They'll deliver you big pallets of this stuff. It's all pretty cheap. What have you identified with your customers that makes your product unique, and why they pick yours over something like one of the standard building material competitors?
Yeah, I could just talk about the current customers I've had. So some of them are people who have lived in or currently live in Adobe structures. So you don't need to sell them. They're perfectly happy, and they just want more blocks to replace some old stuff or whatever's going on. Um, like the city of Huron came out, the mayor kind of reached out to me on LinkedIn, and they have a big kind of sustainability drive over there. They have these rural car shares, where people can rent electric vehicles and go to their medical clinic at the nearest big city. And so it was kind of in line with their strategy for economic development, and also just the kind of theme of the town and what they're working for. And so the idea of they had also had some BLM land that they turned into industrial hemp production. And so they were interested in using some of the hemp in building material for houses. And so they were excited that they could put the hemp in the Adobe blocks and we could build housing with it. So I feel like, there are people, and maybe that's a bit more on the fringe, who are interested in reaching out actively. A number of people have expressed interest for ADUs, just the idea of the comfort and the kind of different style that it provides. And so really with a fairly small, well-defined niche, the business would be on very solid footing, and then it would just be about finding inroads to kind of widen the market share. And I feel like that's there. I probably mentioned in the crash course, but little things like freeway dividing walls, those are just bricks for days. And it's really just somebody connecting the dots to be like, here at the city, we have a low carbon goal, that we want to meet. We also want to encourage local business, to create more economic development and jobs. What if we just kind of went through our city projects and saw where we could put in this more sustainable, locally sourced product? And then, you kind of open this whole new avenue. And so I sort of see kind of strategic inroads like that. I'm not trying to compete with them head to head, on what they do best, but maybe trying to figure out where it seems like them as the main provider of block, it's kind of become a one size fits all, and people sometimes conform their building material to what's available, as opposed to kind of if they had different options. So, just trying to be able to scale a little bit more to be able to provide a consistent quality product, that you can know is going to be in stock in some reasonable time frame. If I can start to hit those benchmarks, I feel like those are the parts where I need to compete with them. The idea of like, oh, which block performance do we like? I feel like people are on board with an Adobe as a environmental energy alternative. But if I can't produce at scale on time, that's really the thing that's important. Hey, I need 20,000 blocks, next week. And so if I'm an artisanal supplier and I need, 3 or 4 months notice, I'm just cutting myself out I think a lot of the jobs.
Well, I mean, you raised another important point there in terms of what's the attraction for yours over the conventional stuff. And it's CO2. Cement is one of the industries with the biggest carbon footprint per pound of product. And you use a little cement, but still, your product has a dramatically lower carbon footprint. Is that a feature that people really relate to and make a decision, or is that just something that's a nice to have?
Uh, it's a nice to have. You know, when I've looked at companies that have created bricks in California, opened and shut in the past, by and large, they've shut because people aren't willing to pay for, saving carbon or something that's more environmentally friendly. I think some of that's changing when you look at the economics of fire insurance and having a very flammable house versus maybe getting a lower policy, having fire resistant materials, particularly if you're like in a, you know, city, urban wild interface or whatever that is where you're really in danger. Um, so yeah, I don't see people paying for it. There is a lot on efficiency, and so the building will operate and save you money because you're running less AC, less heater. Um, and as energy gets more expensive, and also I feel like as the building materials get more expensive over time, tariffs with Canada are going to affect, timber prices. Tariffs on steel are going to affect, steel prices. And so I felt like with the last COVID supply shock, we were aware that the building materials market can really vary widely with supply constraints, and high demand. And so, Earth block is like a predictable uh, product that doesn't really change, that allows people to budget, that has built-in savings on the operation side, and has advantages for kind of fire resilience. I feel like that's much more starting to become a competitive product than in the past, people, trying to appeal to the goodness of people's hearts. And I think we realize like people's hearts are filled with thoughts of money and more money. And that's like pretty much my heart. If you look in there, so I could do good with the money, right? So I could like, provide for family and be helpful. But it's okay that people are self-interested. And so it's the product's job to show how and why it's in their self-interest. And it's in everybody's self-interest if we don't heat the planet too much, but that's hard for us to take personal responsibility for. But luckily Adobe is like a very pleasant material to be surrounded by and to live in. And so I think there's a lot of other kind of emotional
That's
appeal that
always a
can be
hard
made.
thing, and the climate change thing, because it's everyone wants to save the world, but you gotta pay your rent, Um, you don't get to skip that because you have a cool solution for it. Um, so you've talked about also looking forward. What are you most excited about for the upcoming next year for Valley Adobe?
Excited about this pre-approved ADU plan. So one, we'll have gone through the official channels of the building and permitting department, which will be a milestone. We created the pilot homeless structure, so we're getting some data and feedback from that. But just having a real house, will give us a lot of good information, talking about kind of doing it small and learning and then iterating. What should we do different on the next one, or kind of what's going on. And so just doing one ADU would be a big milestone. What makes this an even bigger milestone is that it's going to be on the pre-approved plans. And so that means that any homeowner who wants to do something similar can just grab the plans, make sure there's enough setback in their backyard, and they don't have to pay architectural fees, engineering fees, building permit review fees. They don't have to wait the 6 months to a year, however long it takes to do that process. So there's huge cost and time savings. And there's, I think right now, about 4 or 5 pre-approved plans on their ADU list. This will be the only one out of Adobe. And so it really could create a market because one house is like 10 to 12,000 blocks, and that becomes kind of a major uh,
I,
revenue for
I
us.
saw in your face there both excitement and also harking back to the work-life balance of you got a lot of things going on in the next year. We actually have some good questions kind of coming in. Um, one of them from Thomas is about they're looking at building, some 2 to 3 story uh, build housing in Sacramento, and they're interested in minimizing their embodied carbon, and they're curious about how they could learn about, leveraging earth blocks to do that.
Oh,
What's the largest thing that you guys have worked on so far?
in California, we have not gone through the permitting process. The architect we're working with, Ben Loescher, is out of LA. He, decades back started working with rehabbing older Adobe structures in the LA area and Pioneer Town. And so just found the route to make sure that both old and new Adobe could get permitted in the state of California. Um, and so having somebody like that who's done it before, working with you is helpful. Um, and I studied to do this out in India, and they were building 4-story residential buildings in earthquake zones using earth block, and they were creating two-story structures that won some architectural prize to rebuild after a big earthquake in Gujarat, I think. And so it can go multiple stories for sure. Me personally, it starts to get difficult to build with the brick on the second and the third story. And so I don't know if it's possible. And I'm also interested in hybrid structures where you use some Adobe and some wood. So for example, like the north facing wall, isn't ideal for Adobe because it tends to be out of the sun and so will remain cold. And so using like a thicker 6-inch wood framed with insulation kind of makes sense, along with a lot of interior walls out of wood. They're thinner, quicker to put up. But finding kind of where you're getting the bang for your buck for using earth block on the ground floor, on the south facing wall with an overhang, on the east and west, depending on the climate, surrounded with, I think it's deciduous trees that drop their leaves in winter. So it heats the wall, then they grow the tree, the leaves in summer, and it blocks the wall. And I work for an affordable housing developer, and we had a grant from the Energy Commission to do low carbon construction, and we found the exterior masonry wall that we were doing around the apartment was a very easy way to cut a lot of carbon. We also create pavers to replace sidewalk, and that was kind of driven by our architect team that again saw kind of the carbon intensity of the cement walkways and thought, hey, can't we create a permeable kind of lower carbon alternative, maybe using these earth blocks? And so the asphalt emulsion reduces the absorption of water, which tends to be what can decay a brick with freeze thaw cycle. So all of those, I would say paver, walkways, Adobe exterior
Sounds like
walls.
you and Thomas might have some more things to talk about, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I'll
yeah,
make
that
sure to
might have
connect you
been
guys later.
too in depth.
You mentioned working with the housing group on there, and we got a question from Eugene Lee asking exploring opportunities on affordable housing. You kind of talked about there, but he also mentioned farm worker, migrant, or workforce housing. Self-help enterprises in the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition are excellent nonprofit developers. Have so it
I,
sounds like
I
you
work at
are doing
Self
that.
Help Enterprises. Yeah, I'm a manager in their real estate development department. And I got the job by going to their CEO and trying to see if he would be interested to partner on Adobe self-help homes, sweat equity homes for farm workers. He ended up saying it was a cool idea, but offered me a job in the meantime. I took the job to kind of learn all about construction and development, always with an eye of then figuring out how to try to move Adobe into the modern kind of building industry. And yeah, I spent 5 years there, still work part time there. And yeah, the window of opportunity seemed to have opened where it seemed like, okay, now maybe it's time to start this brick thing. Particularly when self help was looking to replace an exterior wall to one of their residential buildings, and they wanted to use earth material, and we were shipping it from Colorado. And that to me seemed wrong. You know, I was like, we've got earth in California. We got good California earth, you know, might even have some gold in it, you know? So it's like, we don't need to ship earth from Colorado, you know? And so, and just one or two of those big residential kind of project walls like that would keep a small team going. So, you know, saw an opportunity in the housing space. Would definitely like to see more things getting built. And from the people I talk to, people definitely seem interested and like the material. You know, maybe a couple decades ago, it might have been more like, oh, that's dirt, you know. But now I think people get like, oh, that's like a traditional, comfortable, you know, smart, eco way to do stuff. So I think it's just about starting to get products out there for people to see and try. And that's why the ADU plan, like right now, the hardest part is to permit. And it creates uncertainty and it creates cost. And so if you can streamline an ADU onto a pre-approved plan, you're then really hopefully being able to scale it quicker. Whereas right now, people do build, the only people building with Adobe are custom homes, and they're very expensive and they're kind of one-offs. And that's not really like the space I'm trying to go. I feel like it's a widely available, inexpensive, you know, high performing material, and it should just be kind of part of the mainstream and not like the custom home.
I like it. I like where it's going. As we're coming into this, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of, I guess, offer some words of wisdom or, you know, some comments because you want to mention that you wanted to talk about work-life balance a little bit. Any kind of final words that you want people to kind of take away from your experience or from Valley Adobe that you'd want to share?
Oh yeah, here's one, and maybe this is a final one, but definitely I would have some partners if I was going to do this again. You know, I've applied to some grants recently, and they're like, tell us the top three of your leadership team, and then I just put me as one, and then it's like that's it. And it's like if I'm not dragging this thing, it's not moving. And so I sort of feel this kind of constant need to have my shoulders, you know, on the plow. And I feel like different people with different skill sets, you know, would create more of a continuity, more of a community, and there would be enough people pushing at different times that it just kind of had a momentum of its own. I think I thought this would be easier than it was, more mechanized than it actually is, that it would sort of sell itself. And so I was like the Wizard of Oz back there with just a few knobs, you know, and that's all I was doing. But I think recognizing the challenges and the complexity, I would spend some time early on to find kind of a cohort of people that were interested, and try to build a team. I'm trying to do that after the fact. A family friend who used to work at Hewlett Packard in their 3D printing and was very familiar with clays and their properties reached out, and so we're talking about, you know, R&D and some stuff, and so I know we had a class on that in crash course, how to decide when to bring people in, but for me that's my big takeaway is many hands make light work. And um, if you just want to see the thing be successful like I do, I don't feel like I always have to be the one doing the stuff.
All right. Find a partner, network. Because I mean, it seems like everywhere you walk into, you're able to at least walk away with one person who can that you
Right.
can add to your network at least, and they might not be the partner that you need, but they seem to be helping you pretty well.
Hmm.
With that, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank Miguel for joining us today. It was a wealth of information and a lot of excitement there too. I really appreciate it. If you want to connect with Miguel, you can check out valleyadobe.com and I will put his contact information in the chat. Is that okay, Miguel?
Oh yeah.
All right, so I was going to throw that into the chat for everyone. And also I want to call on everybody to give him a round of applause too. Um, Thank you for joining us today, and I want to thank our supporters again. They made this possible. And come and join our future ones coming up. We've got actually next week, we have the deep dive, our later stage accelerator, a information session. So if you can, make sure that you attend those. Go to cleanstart.org and look at our accelerators there, or cleanstart.org/deep dive. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending. Bye, everybody.